Gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this hearing and statement of opening remarks, and I'd like to associate myself this morning especially with that of Mr. Smith from Texas, because I think it's important that we've been at this now for almost 8 years, and the numbers don't look as discouraging perhaps as they did a year ago, but there's not hope on the horizon either. And I look at the numbers that Mr. Smith has rolled out, and I didn't hear them disputed, but 86,000 criminal aliens released onto our streets. And I think of the years that we worked this, and I remember testimony that came here before this committee, for years, shortly after I first arrived in this Congress. And it would be the testimony of how many people died in the desert trying to get into America. Do you have any of that data in your memory to give us an idea, a scope of how many died in the desert trying to get into America?
Oh, my goodness, sir. I've heard of those tragedies, but I don't have that at my fingertips.
Well, I remember the witnesses that came in and testified, and we saw numbers, just the Arizona desert in those years, that would say 200, 250, then the next year it went up. We saw numbers that went over 400 a year just in the Arizona desert. Brooks County, Texas has a lot as well. And I began to think about that, and I began to think about how many Americans died at the hands of those who made it through. And we've done at least 2 GAO studies on that in my time here in this Congress. Apples to apples is a hard thing to arrive at. It's very difficult to unravel this. But I've met a number of the people, and it's heartbreaking to me to think of the many people who are suffering a loss of a loved one because we didn't enforce the law. And when I look through this list of those that have been released by ICE, and I see in this particular list I looked at a little bit ago, 101 released who had committed homicide, and how many others along the way. What's the price to Americans? And so I recall Donald Trump highlighting some of the people in his statement before the convention in Cleveland, and I noticed that last week he made a statement that there are thousands of Americans that are grieving because they've lost a loved one at the hands of someone whom had been encountered by law enforcement in America, including ICE, and been released onto our streets. Would you agree with that statement?
That there are thousands?
Yes, thousands of people who are suffering the loss of a loved one.
I don't have the exact number, but I don't disagree with you, sir. And if I may, Congressman, let me tell you, I am a prosecutor. I come to this job as a prosecutor. I am used to trying to keep the community safe, and I have not discontinued that in this job. I am trying to make the most of it out of the money we have. I told you earlier that 84%
I'm sorry
of the
to
people...
interrupt. The clock is ticking on me, and I don't dispute what you've said, but you have to get your orders from on high. And so if this is a matter of conscience, then I'd ask you now, have you come before this Congress and told us what you needed for resources in order to enforce the law fully, 100%? What do you need for officers? What do you need for prosecutors? What do you need for judges? What do you need for prison beds? I've never seen this administration say we want to enforce 100% of the law. The signal we get looking at this data is they want that this president has given orders from on high to release these criminals onto the streets of America. And if that's egregious to you, why haven't we heard you push back against the president, and why haven't we heard that request?
I'll have to push back against the facts you're asserting, sir. I really have tried to make this clear, but there is no discretion in these releases other than for about a third of the number you're talking about. So when we continue to repeat that the administration is releasing people willy-nilly out on the streets who have criminal records, we've talked about the Zabidas. That's the United States Supreme Court. That's not ICE.
It's going to take a lot longer for us to get down into this than we actually have here. But I'd like to ask you, do you recognize these names? Sarah Root.
I do.
Brandon Mendoza.
I do.
Dominic Durden.
Yes.
Jazz Shaw.
Yes.
His father, Jamil.
Yes.
Tessa Tranchett. Tessa Tranchett and Allie Kuhnhart.
Yes, I do.
I'm glad that you do. I'm thankful that you do, and we need to remember them. This law, the laws that we have, the immigration laws that we have, are here to be enforced. If it has to be, if we have to lay out the standard that it's going to be 100%, if we have to put the resources out there to do that, this Congress, I believe, and the next Congress will be prepared to do that. We need to restore the respect for the rule of law. Americans are dying every single day because of our failure to do so and because of turning people loose on the streets that don't return back again. And I see face after face of grieving Americans. They are in the thousands over the time that I've watched this tragedy. And I'm glad that you're aware and you recognize these names, and I appreciate the personal part of this. But we need a fresh start on this immigration law in this country. Thank you very much. I yield back.